All right, I'm now at part three, the body factory. And what marks the past century is not just the quality of these mass slaughters that we saw, which we had never seen before in such industrial numbers, as we see in Slaughterhouse Five, but the relentlessness of them. I mean, they just keep on coming and keep on coming, and they get worse and worse. And at one point, I remember talking about the Rwandan genocide, and I remember talking about the fact that yeah, you have to imagine that people are prepared to, for 100 days or so it took to kill these 800,000 people. A lot of them were hacked to death. I mean, they were hacked to death with machetes. And I was giving a talk about this, and somebody got really upset with me and said, the Nazis weren't running around with a bunch of machetes. It's like, whoa, hold on a second. First of all, I'm not saying that the genocides that were practiced in the death camps or the work camps were in any way not horrible. Of course they were horrible. Is this a competition to see whose genocide is worse? Are you measuring this by, how many deaths were accrued in X number of days? Because that's not what we're doing here. And there is a sort of possessive quality about genocides. People are like, well, that's my genocide. I mean, that my genocide is worse than yours. So I remember saying, things have gotten worse. And this person was very upset with me. And so we had a bit of an email exchange. And they said at one point, you said they've gotten worse. How have they gotten worse? And I wrote back and I said, well, what do you know about the internal exile that happened in the Soviet Union? Because that's 20 million people that were essentially made to disappear into the gulags. And this person said, the what now? I was like, this is kind of the problem. There are so many genocides in the 20th century that you may not know them all. I mean, that's why there's genocide studies. I mean, it's a horrible thing to know that we've had to open new departments, essentially in sociology, in history, in military science, in law, to not only deal with war atrocities, but to deal with genocides. Anyway. So this is the thing we're dealing with, and that marks the 20th century. The 21st century, so far, not yet, right? I mean, there have been, no doubt about it, what look to us, a lot of us, like deliberate, targeted genocides. I think that I don't hold any brief for Aung San Suu Kyi's treatment of the Rohingya in Myanmar as being anything but a genocide. I'm like, no, she's specifically like, they're Muslim, take them out and kill them. Force them into live in swamps, go and kill them. Okay. But anyway, I mean, if somebody wants to fight about that, be my guest. I mean, I'm not going to get into a fight with somebody about how bad their particular situation is. Like, bad is bad. To quote Huey Lewis, that great thinker. But Joe is thinking about it. And he says on page 61, you couldn't lose that much of yourself and still keep on living. Yet if you knew you had lost and were thinking about why, then you must be alive, because dead men don't think. Dead men aren't curious, and he was sick with curiosity, so he must not be dead yet. Now, this is page 61. This is basically the cogito again. This is Descartes, essentially basically, I am living because I am thinking, doubting. Therefore I am. And Joe is terrified and in pain. Therefore he's alive and he's thinking. And he struggles with the condition of having lost so much that he can't possibly still be a human being. And this is the struggle that I just think it's a very human thing to go through, ironically, especially with this kind of dreadful situation that he finds himself in. So on page 63, he says he was nothing but a piece of meat, like the chunks of cartilage old Professor Vogel used to have in biology. Chunks of cartilage that didn't have anything except life, so they grew on chemicals. He was one up on the cartilage. He had a mind, and it was thinking. And so this is what happens where his mind takes him to memory. And so it takes him basically into the background of how are you going to understand this. And Trumbo's very good about this because he sort of assumes that nobody has an education more than high school education, which was actually not a bad education at the time. I mean, a high school education in you had to learn all kinds of things. You had to learn how to run a farm. You had to learn to balance the books. You had to do ledgers. You had to be able to do math because you had to be able to do the mathematics that would run a farm. You had to be educated about soil. So it was very interesting if we look back at the things that people knew, say 100 years ago. Well, it's 2021. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and a Happy New Year. 2021. As I give this lecture, it is January 1st. So Happy New Year. Happy belated New Year to you. So if you look back at like a curriculum for people who are going through high school in, say, 1920, wow. Boy, I mean, I couldn't pass that, and it's amazing stuff. It's a tight curriculum. It's very limited, but oh boy, they had to learn to do mental arithmetic because there wasn't necessarily paper to write on. I mean, it's really very interesting. Look back. Anyway, so Joe's memory takes him into sort of like, what does he know? Well, biology class. Well, everybody would have had this biology class, and so on. If you're white and poor, at least. If you're of color in the South, no, not. You would probably not have gone to school because of the Jim Crow laws and because of the ongoing. Okay. So Joe understands his position is that of being reduced to a specimen in a tank, and he will return to this at the very end of the novel. But he also is, and the reason I call this the body factory is that he's talking about basically what do the doctors know, and the doctors he comes to feel know more than they should know. On page 82, he says the doctors were getting pretty smart, especially now that they had 3 or 4 years in the army with plenty of raw material to experiment on. If they got to you quickly enough so you didn't bleed to death, they could save you from almost any kind of injury. Evidently, they had gotten to him quickly enough. And this last line is so dripping with sarcasm and bitterness. It is still a discussion, basically, about euthanasia, which we are having today. And we need to have, I think, even more pressingly, that the right to die movement, as far as I'm concerned, is not moving fast enough because I think people don't want to deal with it. It's like we don't have time to. We do not have the time or the or the inclination, to quote Jack the Ripper, to not think about how we want to die. That's not a good idea. But Joe is aware of himself as a medical subject on 158. He says, it was a great piece of luck, says one of the doctors. He imagines one of the doctors saying, and we're all very proud. Stop by in my office on your way out and I'll give you one of his teeth for a souvenir on 158. And so these medical men are not seen as forces for good, but as bureaucrats who essentially take the existence of Joe as a proof of their own wonderfulness.